So it's going to be interesting to see who's on the play here because that changes the. It seems like Christian Hauck's on the draw, so Dreadhood Butcher is a much worse card.
Yep, Sperling is going to have the potential for turn 2 Growth Spiral, one of the strongest moves in Magic.
Obviously, there's not a fatal push to combine that Growth Spiral with, but you can still have nice things like Growth Spiral Tapland or Thoughtseize to kind of cut off Christian Hauck. It's something like Growth Spiral Thoughtseize on the play is so much better because if there's only a single 2-drop, you get to really cut the tempo away.
It looks like they just quickly remade the match. And that is a good variety in an opening hand. Having the Censor and the Tail's End. Tail's End probably going to be a dead card.
Yeah, it really does very, very little in this matchup. The Censor, though, will probably counter whatever 2-drop hits, so I wouldn't be surprised to see it interact with the Scrappy Scrounger. And the Golden Familiar actually here is kind of nice. It's going to add up to about 4 to 5 damage being drawn there, so that was actually a really nice pickup just because of the overtime damage it adds.
Got Cauldron Familiar, the cat, swinging in for 1. A variety of shock lands to choose from here.
Yeah, we can take the damage. I like the Scrounger here because of the existence of Censor. If it gets countered, which is still quite likely here because of the amount of damage it prevents, you at least haven't lost the card. Okay, that's actually kind of interesting.
Cycling. Not what I expected. It is tricky, like countering a Scrappy Scrounger because you know it will come back at some point.
No, I think Matt was valuing extremely highly just getting to more mana. That's why
I was expecting to see an Uro. There is a Growth Spiral, which is like a teeny tiny non-life gaining, not a creature Uro.
Yeah, but this damage is gonna add fast. That's already free from the Scrappy Scrounger. The Cauldron Familiar getting drawn already dealt free so far. It's probably gonna deal 1 or 2 extra minimum.
Yeah, Hauck has already got Sperling down to 14.
Yeah, and Woe Strider is kind of nice here because even if Matt Sperling draws one of the 2 extinction events, or if Christian Hauck puts Sperling on one of the 2 extinction events, you get to at least sacrifice the Cauldron's Familiar and scry twice. So it's not actually that bad.
3 times. Don't forget about the goat. I guess you might want to save the goat for the Priest of Forgotten Gods. I just like sacrificing the goat.
Yeah. It's actually once technically because you'd leave the Scrappy Scrounger around. Oh well. Any number between 1 and 3.
Some number of sacrifice.
Yeah, and missing the land is, I mean, that's why also, we were saying earlier, like all these decks that are flooding, but that's why you're playing 28 or 29 lands is what happens when you don't hit your land drops is really not looking good.
Just so everybody knows, no, we couldn't see the game for a moment there either. But we're coming back. It looks like Sperling's connection might have gotten a little bit choppy. So we're going to switch over to Christian Hauck's view.
I was going to say it's more like the Uro's fog, right? When it comes into play. That's what happened. It just fogged over the screen for a good while there.
It was like there's no land. Uro coming down from the top of the screen and then causing everything to go blurry.
Yeah. Or somebody points out we're playing Magic on an Atari 2600, but that's different. That said, no matter how much fog there is, the fact is 1-drop, 2-drop that didn't get stopped, free drop that didn't get stopped, missed land drops. The tale is all of time of aggro winning a game of Magic.
And that is the tale's end for game 1. I like my bad jokes. Are we going to see the Thoughtseize just to take a peek at that hand?
I mean, you could.
Pay 2 life so you know how defeated you are.
Let's see. Is this lethal damage? It's technically not lethal. You can keep playing on the game. It's not looking good, but it's not lethal damage.
It is ever so slightly off lethal. It's true. It's actually an attack and a Mayhem Devil. You did need to get that Mayhem Devil. Can it be top decked? Oh, Cauldron Familiar. That's nice. Does get a little bit more damage in. and can always draw something off of sacrificing it.
Yeah,
The
and you get
Midnight
to
Reaper.
yeah, it's pretty nice. 1 mana, draw a card, drain for 1, scry 1.
Oh, and
Oh,
there's
this
the Mayhem Devil. That's what I
no,
said. It's an attack and a Mayhem Devil off from lethal.
there we go. I think like nothing could have been drawn there, like a literal blank piece of cardboard with a magic card back. But yeah, this is it does come back. I think it was kind of that interesting decision from Matt to cycle the censor rather than crowning the scrounger. But it doesn't mean it's wrong or right. It's just interesting that Matt was prioritizing making land drops over stopping Christian Hauck's development. And I thought that was actually kind of an interesting decision to maybe go back and, if you wanted to really learn that matchup, go back and rewatch that moment and try to figure out if you would have done the same thing in that spot or not.
We're going to take a short break while our 2 players sideboard, and we will be back soon with more Magic. And we are back from sideboarding. It looks like Matt Sperling made no changes to the deck. I don't think that's quite right. I think it's just not being reflected in our overlay here. Lots of changes, though, for Christian Hauck. We see the switch over from going into this slower play strategy with Corvold and Scavenging Ooze and Vraska.
Yeah, and got rid of the Priest of Forgotten Gods because that's the card that requires the most synergy, which is not really what you want when your opponent has a bunch of spot removal, so kills the Priest if it's relevant, and generally it isn't. So that's indeed why you see Thoughtseize. Actually, there was actually, I believe, a playset of Noxus Grasp in the sideboard, but that's a playset that you only bring in really for a matchup like Gruul. Against a matchup like Sultai, you just want a key Noxus Grasp to kill a Nissa or a Neuro that's on the battlefield.
Not that many green targets to hit, since it's not a deck that actually plays a lot of creatures that have color identities. There's an awful lot of lands that get turned into creatures, but of course those are colorless.
And here, Aethergust is kind of like one of the more conditional cards in this matchup, because sometimes it does nothing because your opponent goes Cold and Familiar, Scrap Heap, Scrounger, for example.
Oh, but I think it's going to do something here, seeing that hand.
Yes. It might be possible for Hauck to put Sperling on 1 Aethergust because that Midnight Reaper got taken. Since it was kind of tempting to take the Dreadhorde Butcher in that spot. It was the only natural 2-drop. So when you Thoughtseize an aggro player, right? You either want to take a card that's going to be really problematic to deal with, or cut their curve if you're going to keep Thoughtseize. So if they can go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, if you can take whatever 2-drop or solo 2-drop or solo 3-drop they have, you generally would do that because it cuts their curve. So the fact that Matt did not cut the curve there, took the 3-drop rather than the 2-drop, says that there is a card in hand that Matt Sperling has that deals specifically with the 2-drop. And since there's no Fatal Push in Matt's list, that means Aethergust.
We're seeing a smart play around the Gust, playing out Woe Strider here. It's also good to have the Woe Strider on the board before the Mayhem Devil lands.
Yeah.
Dreadhorde Butcher being thrown back into the library.
Yep. Plus, actually, interestingly with this, we end up in a spot where Christian Hauck doesn't believe that Matt Sperling has Cry of the Carnarium, because you wouldn't take Midnight Reaper in that spot. Because there's no sacrifice outlet. So you'd leave Midnight Reaper because it's a free drop to play that you can play Cry of the Carnarium against. So that's another way to go, okay, there's no Cry of the Carnarium. So this Woe Strider is pretty safe, and that's why you don't play Mayhem Devil too. It's like a compounded amount of information from such a simple decision of that, from what appears to be a simple, quote unquote, simple decision of Thoughtseize.
Snock does have 4 attack power, able to swing in this turn. Bringing Matt down to 8 life. That's not where you want to be. Even though, like, you might look at Christian Hauck's life total and be like, well, he's at 13. That's because he's had to shock in every single land so far this game. Yeah. And did you see that there was a shock this turn as well? Do you think that that was playing around potentially sensors still being in the game?
Yep, you might as well. 2 life isn't going to probably matter in this game. So, yeah, play around sensor. You don't want to be the person that, like, runs a free drop into that and then plays your land. That's not the...
I don't know. I always forget, like, oh, what's Sensor? What's Jawari Disruption? I'm not going to bother playing my land first. And that is not the top deck Matt wants to see. It's a Thoughtseize.
Yeah. And decided to run the Mayhem Devil, even if there's an Aether Gust. Matt's slow on cards, so it would get rid of it from the hand, especially you don't know about the second one. Plus, you really don't want to run into the Carnarium.
Of course, Mayhem Devil being redrawn. Going to give, is that 1 short of lethal? Is that
yeah, it should be 1 short because you can't sacrifice the Woe Strider to itself.
Yeah, still an awful lot of damage being banked on that board. And a Fabled Passage for Matt. Well, you may as well Thoughtseize, see what your opponent had before you lose the game.
Yeah. But that's pretty much going to call it for the match, right? Because
oh, absolutely. Yeah, Fabled Passage. You know, you could sacrifice that to take 1 extra damage from Mayhem Devil. That's a professional strategy right there.
Yeah. What about the good gaming mode?
Ooh, well, they both GG'd each other. I feel like when there's lethal being presented, that is the friendly handshake from one player to another saying, you played well, I won, but you played well.
But yeah, you could. Some people might have spotted Christian Hauck's camera. Look very happy to take that.